Let's get into the big topic of open source, something that we actually say at Red Hat. We have a
This is so
We
awesome.
are an open culture that believes in
actually a big
importance of
piece
What is that process that a developer, or let's say a
As the
developer,
Kubernetes ecosystem really boomed.
Hello and welcome to this week's Ask an OpenShift Admin Office Hours live stream. I am Andrew Sullivan, and I am joined, as always, by co-host and good friend, Mr. Johnny Rickard. How are you, sir?
I'm good, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm really good, actually. We were chit-chatting beforehand, lost track of time. It ended up being like 2 minutes after that we started. You're sending me reminders of turn on Do Not Disturb and all this other stuff, and I almost left myself on mute. Like it was as the video was ending, I was clicking myself off mute. Yeah, it's having a blast. I
That's the way it should go.
So, yeah, it's been a good week, right? It's been an interesting week so far. I have to say, not that I don't love my job and everything that we do here, but one of the highlights of the week for me so far has been seeing the early gameplay footage for the new Zelda, for the new game, Tears of the Kingdom. So,
I haven't even seen it. Is it awesome?
Yeah, it it was same engine, same kind of look and feel overall as gosh, why can I not think of the name of the first one? Anyways, this is going to bother me until I figure it out.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Gosh, I'm so like I don't know why I can't remember this. Anyways, so yeah, it was one of those things of I was super excited to see that. My son's super excited about it. He's a big video gamer. He was telling me that apparently his high school now has a Valorant esports team. So Breath of the Wild.
Nice.
Thank you, Yuri. I completely just brain farted on that one. I could not think of that. So thank you so much. But yeah, that was it's been a good week.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, ephemeral storage. Yes. I have slept between then. I don't think I've drank since then, but I have slept, so that means that everything gets reset.
That's right.
But yeah. So how you been,
dude? Same. Just busy. My son is in band and he's in the front ensemble. So they had the big performance up in Fort Worth last weekend, and yeah, they pulled third place. So not bad for a first year band.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
So
and man, kids are incredible. I mean, like just all the different schools that we saw, like it's incredible how talented some of these kids are. It's awesome.
Have you gotten pulled in any summit stuff yet?
No, I don't think I'm going to. If I do, it'll be like everything else, last minute.
Yeah, I've got a lab at Summit. So for anybody who'll be at Summit, so it's the last full week of May, the 25th. Sounds right. So it's in Boston this year. So I'll be there running a lab on OpenShift virtualization, helping out with a bunch of other stuff as well. Number of other labs, number of presentations, of course, the booth and all of the other things that are going on at the booth all the time. So yeah, it's going to be a chaotic week, which I'm very much looking forward to. I cannot wait to get back to Red Hat Summit because I've missed it very much.
Well, especially now it's going to be super technical, right? So it's like you're going to be like back in your element, and then with the craziness, it'll just make time fly.
Yeah, and just getting to meet people again. It's so funny because we started the streaming concept 3 years ago now. Started doing these streams because when everything shut down with the pandemic, one of the first things that got canceled were the conferences, right? Summit got canceled, KubeCon got canceled, all this other stuff. And it ended up we were sitting down, we had a team meeting amongst the tech marketing folks, and it was like, how do we recreate that ability for people at a conference? You walk into the booth and, hey, I have this problem, or I have this question, or I want to know how this works, and you can just walk up and you can talk to anybody. And that was kind of the impetus, the starting bit for how we got started with the office hours set of live streams of, hey, we want to give our audience the ability to kind of recreate or experience that being able to ask us things, that you can't get, or that, at least not when we're, when we're not in person. And yes, I agree, Jamie. Boston is awesome town. So I've been there several times. It's my youngest daughter's. It's her favorite city to go to. Not the least of which, because she loves to go up to Mike's and get a cannoli and a lobster tail. So
nice.
Kids love sugar. Kids love sugar. That's all I got.
But so do some adults in Texas. Just saying. I will crush a cannoli.
I'm sure. What's that donut place in Austin that it's like out of an Airstream trailer, and it's like donuts are as big as my massive head?
Oh, I have no idea. I'm glad I don't know. Like, that's bad news.
So anyways, we got a huge list of things to go through today. So yeah, today our top of mind list is like 5 or 6 items deep. This topic is a big one. It's one that I think a lot of people, the answer to the question, is your cluster production ready, is different for everyone. Each application, each environment, each organization, each administrator is going to have different requirements. So the impetus for this, or the when we were talking about it yesterday, it was one of those like, what are some maybe common things? What are some things from Andrew's perspective, or from Johnny's perspective, or from you all, from our audience? What are some things that are, that you need to do to be quote unquote production ready with your cluster? So we've got a whole list of things that we kind of brainstormed and thought about, and I really hope that we can, have a conversation, not just between Johnny and I, but of course for anybody who's watching us. And I'll also extend that out to anybody who is listening or watching us not live. You're more than welcome to reach out to Johnny or I, as always, via email. I'm at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com, or social media at Practical Andrew. Which I think I've got my Twitter notifications figured out. For a long time, it just wasn't sending me any notifications. But I thought I had it left on for like direct messages and stuff like that. But yeah, anyways. Or you can reach Johnny via Johnny@redhat.com, JONNY, or JRocketTX on all the various social media platforms, etc. And I always like to plug in that the Kubernetes Slack channel is a great way to talk to us live as well. I try to keep an eye on it at least once or twice a day. Johnny, I know you're on there. Sometimes we'll tag each other with things, stuff like that.
Yep.
So
I just posted the link to it as well.
Thank you, sir. Let's see. Our Hope 9. Better question is, are you and the rest of the team ready? A cluster runs OpenShift, so that's going to be ready. Yeah, that's one of the things that that is on the list of things to talk about, right? It's not just the technical aspect of, hey, yes, this configuration is there or this thing is there. It's also the procedural aspect of, do you understand how to do these types of things with the cluster? Whether that's disaster recovery, which is a procedure, upgrade process, that type of stuff, as well as just from an administrator knowledge perspective. And for me, that is 2 big things, and we'll get into more of this in a second. But it's, do you feel like your admins are like, I hate to say it this way, competent enough to like keep a cluster running and healthy? And 2, and arguably most importantly, do you know how to access support? That's a big one. And it's so funny because I remember when I was an administrator and I was a storage admin, we had a IBM DS8000 storage array and nobody knew how to call support. Like,
yeah,
there wasn't a sticker on it. There wasn't like, oh yeah, go talk to this person and they'll send it. Like, nobody knew how to access support. And we ended up just going to like the IBM website and just, dialing, I don't know, 1-800 IBM help or something. I don't remember what it was. And it took us a while. We got passed around a lot, but eventually got help. But it's one of those things like, that's kind of terrifying, if you don't think about it. What if it had been an outage? What if things had been down?
Yeah, that's, I love that question. Or when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's so good. Because, I've had customers where like, even after we've gone, they're still emailing me like, hey man, I'm having this problem with this, And I'm like, you have to put a ticket in. And then like, I can jump back in with the ticket, but you have to put this ticket in first. Like, we have to get some people on it and some eyes on it that aren't from the previous consulting engagement.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a huge one.
Yeah. It's I've had that happen as well. Previous jobs where you leave and hey y'all, thanks for all the fish. See you at the see you the next time around. And months later, you're getting emails saying, "So this thing broke. Do you know how to fix it?" And
Yeah.
Let's see. Looking at chat here, Stephen, is it smart and possible to use ThinCSI storage class on a vSphere UPI installation for internal registry and production environments? I would say yes. So, well, yes, but as always, it depends. So there's nothing wrong with using the thin CSI class. Remember, it's a block storage type, which means that it will be limited to RWO. So your registry instance in that case will be limited to a scale of 1. Nothing wrong with that, assuming it fits within your usage model. Are you going to be deploying a huge cluster that has, dozens of nodes, thousands of pods, where a single registry instance is going to become a bottleneck? Do you have, from a storage performance perspective, whatever storage is underneath that, whatever data store that is it able to provide the performance that it needs, both read and write, primarily read. Remember, when you go and deploy a new container image, I push the image once, but maybe I have 1,000 pods that all consume it, across 3 dozen nodes. Well, that's 3 dozen pulls that are all going to happen. So yeah, lots of stuff inside of there to take into account. Oh, look at you getting all fancy showing questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were all tracking the same question. That's all. And Dwayne asked a question just before that.
Let's see. Does the concept of production-ready clusters change even more for zero trust issues and efforts? I don't know. I don't. I guess I would ask if you can clarify what you mean by zero trust issues there, Dwayne.
Yeah, I think on the zero trust, like when you're implementing zero trust, you have something like a service mesh. So like you need to be able to, essentially support that capability. And like if you're doing this in dev, you might not have your zero trust implementation implemented at that level. But like once you start getting into staging, the closer you get to the user or to the internet or whatever, then you'll want to be closer and closer to like what production is going to look like. So, I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's a good point. Going back to, last week we talked about the Reddit outage, and one of the comments I made, and I replied to one of the email lists internally saying the same thing, which is like that outage was caused because their production had unknown configuration. It was using the Calico route reflectors. So it was an unknown. Could you account for that? Well, no. The only way that you can account for that is by like forcefully, like authoritatively knowing that you as the administrator or the team of administrators, know and understand that cluster. I would argue, by if there's any question in your mind, like, I don't know where this cluster came from. It's been around for, 3, 4, 5 years. The whole admin team has left. There might be unknown configuration in there. Redeploy and move the applications. Kubernetes clusters they don't need to be snowflakes.
Was it you that had mentioned like something about haunted? Like, do we consider that cluster haunted? I love that idea because it's like, okay, to me that means that cluster is a black box, right? Like I know it's there, I know things are running on it, and everything's fine. But as far as like, do I know everything, the ins and outs about that? Like it's a black box. Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, it. I get. It's an extreme position in a lot of cases. There's Ian. Ian joined us on the stream to talk about OpenShift virtualization, and he has a thing. We were on a customer call, and he's like, "Well, every customer has a test cluster. Sometimes it's even separate from production." And I'm like, "It's you're not wrong, Ian, but man, that's terrifying." But so I get that not everybody has the just the bandwidth, and I don't mean bandwidth like literally from the internet. I mean like you're one person who might be wearing 2 or 3 or 5 different hats, or a small team of people who are doing everything and can't account for those things. But our Hope 9 applications designed by a smart team or a group of baboons. What's that thing about a team of monkeys with typewriters will eventually create Shakespeare? Let's see. I'm just quickly scrolling through chat. We should probably get through our top of mind stuff here pretty quick, and then we can move into today's topic. So, as always, thank you for all of the questions. Please keep those coming in. We'll keep track of those here on our side and do our best to go back and answer all of them. And of course, you can always repost your question as well. I would just ask that you don't like spam question in there if we happen to skip it or anything like that. We'll do our best. So with that being said, notes documents, let's see, what's some things we can talk about here? Deprecations in Kubernetes 1.27, Johnny.
Yeah. So if, let me post this link here. There, Kubernetes one.
I got it while you're talking.
Okay, cool. So with the new version of Kubernetes that's coming out, there's going to be some deprecations. I didn't go through the entire list. It looked like there was a bunch of command line entries that were going to be removed. I didn't see a lot on the API side. There was something from the storage API. But I don't know how relevant that's going to be to OpenShift. But definitely go out and check that out, because you're going to want to make sure that you're not using those command line switches, or that something that they're pulling out isn't going to affect your cluster negatively.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that one. I'm going to share my screen here. So I'll piggyback off of that comment to talk about something that is related. So it was last week or the week before, Johnny. Somebody was asking about, like, how can I be aware of, how do I know all of the things that are happening that are changing inside of my cluster in order to prevent, being accidentally, impacted by something that changes.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out, yes, release notes are still probably the best place to look, not just the OpenShift release notes, but the Kubernetes release notes as well. But I discovered that there's a whole series of KCS articles that are like literally titled "Preparing to Upgrade to Whatever Version of OpenShift." And it walks through and it talks about a number of different things. Here's Kubernetes documentation on 1.25. Here's removed APIs that may be impacted by you, including, notable changes where it links to, I don't know if you can read it, but down in the lower left-hand corner there, it doesn't look like it's showing up in the stream. Anyways, these links go over to Kubernetes documentation about each one of those. So there's just a whole host of information here that I thought was really interesting. And you can actually go, and if you highlight that and we go to search, preparing to upgrade OpenShift container platform as our search term, you can see here's 4.9, 13, 14. Wow, really? 14 already? I'm confused as to how it was. I'm confused as to how it was published like 11 months ago, not 10 months ago. That's interesting. Anyways, so 4.12. I'm sure if I change this, you notice they updated this interface, by the way.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, so I'll switch to articles in here. Now it just limits itself to the articles. But so yeah, I'll post the link for that guy in here. Come on, if I can get back to the right place. So I'll post this KCS article. Well, it looks like Jamie might have beat me to it. 5381. Yep. So Jamie beat me to it. But yeah, those are good ones. I discovered. So yeah, back on the whole updates thing, changes in Kubernetes, changes in OpenShift. I would also remind you to take note of your operators. So the layered operators, the layered features, functions, products, etc., on top of OpenShift that are deployed via operators will often have their own compatibility matrix as well. So you got to kind of check with all of those. One thing that I've noticed, or I've heard, I wouldn't say I've noticed, but I've heard people talking about is they'll upgrade their cluster and then OLM will go in and suddenly like all of these other operators will update. So you might want to be at least aware of that if you're using the automatic update setting, if you're not doing manual updates. And if you are doing manual updates, be sure to go back and revisit each one of those operators and update it as necessary.
Yeah, especially if you're doing like community operators, like if you're in a Red Hat certified operator, then that index image gets pushed out with the update. And so, if you're using, say, if you want to be locked in on OpenShift pipelines 1.7 or something like that, right? If you go to 4.12, that version of OpenShift pipelines isn't part of that catalog image. So that might present an issue for you. So definitely check it out. Make sure test your community operators, because you'll probably get bit the worst out of the community operators.
Yeah, Jamie posted this KCS there in the chat. This I haven't read through this one. I didn't know this one existed. This one looks like an interesting one just based off of the title there. So all the different API removals all the way up through 4.14, which if 4.12 is 1.25 based, it makes sense for 4.13 to be 26 and 4.14 to be 27. So that's why we already know what APIs are being removed. So yeah, this is I like this one because it walks through exactly the process of using OCGet API request counts and dissecting where those are being used. So
that's awesome.
I'm bookmarking this one, Jamie. Thank you. There's a script in the comments. Okay, so let's come down here. Oh, okay.
Oh, right. Good old John Call. That's my guy. I know that dude.
Okay, I'll have to take a look at that one. But yeah, thank you, Jamie. Let's see, what was next on our list, Johnny?
Let's see. The next one on the list is Cert Manager is GA and 4.12, or no, it's GA now. I'm sorry. Yeah, so it's GA. So that's gonna be awesome. We did a live stream on this. I'll find the link and send it over. But yeah, we did when it was tech preview. And so now it's GA. It's official. Red Hat OpenShift. So we can start implementing certificates and stuff like that. The one downside, I don't want to say downside, but a limitation to using Cert Manager is that it doesn't support routes natively. So you still would if you just create an ingress object, you can assign the secrets to the ingress object, or you could do a combination of, I'll find the other operator, but there's an operator that one of the guys internal to Red Hat had written that does that conversion. So it takes a secret and then it applies it to a route. And so that way you can actually still use routes. So I'll find both of those and post the links.
Okay. Yeah. One thing to note. So big red box. If you use the tech preview version of Cert Manager, you have to remove it along with all of the artifacts and then redeploy and reuse. So just be aware of that if you are doing an update. It's not a straightforward just go in and tell the operator to update. And that does happen occasionally with the operators. Let's see. Summit, we already talked about. A reminder that Ansible Fest and Summit are combined this year, so there'll be a bunch of additional Ansible stuff happening there. We talked about the preparing to upgrade articles. The update path tool. So the update path tool, this is one that I think most people have probably seen us talk about here on the stream. I'll post the link here. So for a long time, this has been really helpful of showing like, I'm on this version, how do I get to this version? So I was looking at it earlier today and I went to, I think it was stable 4.11. And I was looking at this and it struck me as funny because I've got this big blob of versions and then I've got this other separate blob of versions. And I was looking at this, I'm like, why are there two separate blobs? Like these should all be tied together. Like, why can I not jump? Like what happened here? So I went into the upgrade path tool and I said stable 4.11, excuse me. And, sure, we're on 4.10.3 and I want to go all the way up to 4.11.31. You see there's no update paths. Maybe you can't see it. But there's no update paths for 4.11 to 4.12 in stable yet. Sorry for banging the microphone there. When I click generate, you'll notice that it now includes conditional updates. So remember before it would just not have anything inside of there. So the reason why that is this way, and again, I don't think y'all can see this, but basically all of the 4.11 releases have some conditional update associated with them. So that's why on that previous screen with the two big blobs, there's no direct connection because there is no update that doesn't have a conditional. And then we can, of course, click on these and see, what is this? Does this impact me? And as the administrator, we can make a decision about whether or not it's something that I want to have prevent, or stop me from doing an update. You can see on this one, probably safe if you're not doing an AWS cluster. So I'll also note that, as I just said a moment ago, updates from 4.11 to 4.12 still not in stable channel, which also means that EUS updates, sorry for the dog going crazy in here, EUS updates are not available from 4.10 to 4.12 yet either. So I hope that those will become available soon. Usually what we say is the typical window is 45 to 60 days after GA is when stable updates become available. So we're past the 60-day window at this point. But remember, it's a goal, not a guarantee. And you can always use the fast channel to update today. Where's my... There we go. So my cluster is already 412, but otherwise I'd show you. But yeah, you can always switch over to the fast channel. As soon as I remember how, always switch over to the fast channel, and you'll be able to do those updates today. And it is fully supported. So that is something that's really important. Doing updates in the fast channel is fully supported. And once you update, you can still switch back to the stable channel. So let's say today you're on 4.11.31, in stable channel, switch to fast, do your update to 4.12. Whatever. That's a fully supported update. Once you're there, switch back to the stable channel for stable 4.12, and you still are fully supported. You can switch back and forth with those at will as you need. So, okay. I've been ignoring chat while I was running my mouth.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of questions, but like they're kind of all over the place. But the one that's I think really relevant to right now is we had a question from Cameron, and I apologize if I butchered your name, or Makaran. I really butchered your name. Sorry about that. Is there a stable 4.12 version available for production right now?
Yes. Yeah. So it's only updates that are not in the stable channel. Or let me rephrase that. It's only updates from 4.11 to 4.12 that are not on the stable channel. So you can see I'm using stable 4.12 right now. My cluster actually has an update available, so 4.12.8. So yes, new cluster deployments, absolutely you can use stable, and again with existing upgrades from 4.11 to 4.12. And we can look at that if we go to console.redhat.com/OpenShift /releases. Thank you, Chrome, for being helpful with my URL. So in here you can see the current set of releases. So 4.12.8 is the current stable release. 4.12.9 is the current fast. And EUS, even though EUS to EUS updates are not available right now, in the EUS channel for 4.12 is 8. You notice for the moment, candidate and fast are matching. Usually that'll switch pretty soon though. So I hope that answered your question. If not, feel free to ask, and we'll do our best to clarify. Let's see. What other questions have we got here, Johnny?
So if we go back up, Dwayne had added some context to his question about the zero trust thing, and let me see if I can find it really quick. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a good problem to have.
No, it's perfect. Yeah, I'm not complaining at all. Microsegmentation. So he was asking like how does the status of production ready change when you get when you have zero trust issues or things. And so he was talking about like microsegmentation, levels of trust, identity, having DevOps on the same page, those types of zero trust issues.
Yeah, I link that, or at least in my head, I associate that with what are the specific requirements of your environment. And I think there are 3 major things that play into that. One, of course, is application requirements. What does the application need to do what the application does from a feature and capability standpoint? Do I need service mesh? Do I need OVN and not OVN Kubernetes and not OpenShift SDN? Like all of those types of configuration and feature level things. 2 is your organization's requirements. So this is like the security team saying you need to have this configured or something like that, or this setting set this way, or we need to apply this profile, or whatever that happens to be. And then 3rd, which is kind of an extension of the second one, is regulatory requirements. If you operate in an environment where you have stringent, you must have PCI DSS compliance and all of the things that are associated with that, whatever those are. Of course, that's how it from a technical configuration perspective, how it falls out, in my opinion. And some customers, you know, I used to work for one of these customers. Our requirements were basically none, right? It was the applications. This was a virtualization environment, but the applications were like, well, yeah, it'd be great if we had HA for the VMs, but if not, it's okay if they're down for a little while. We'll be okay. And it was one of those, like, it was just a very strange environment to work in. It was a private company, a very small company. We didn't have any regulatory compliance because like none of those VMs hosted anything that was outward customer facing. It was all like supporting our own people. And so, well, yes, it cost money. It wasn't the same as, well, we can't complete, think an e-commerce store. Like, we literally can't sell things if the website is down. If the website goes down, there's a direct correlation to lost money. So yeah, some organizations, some applications, it's very lax. Some it's extremely stringent and very, very detailed, very complex requirements for that. And I just want to point out that when we say ready for production, or when we ask ourselves, is our cluster ready for production? That is certainly one aspect of it. Not one that I think Johnny or I could cover in any depth or detail because it's such a broad range. I know for me, when we started talking about this topic, it was a lot of the other things that surround that, and sometimes things that we don't think about from a people process perspective.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that, Johnny.
No, I think you answered that really well. So, yeah. So another question that we got was from Andre, and so he has a customer that has a UPI cluster of 9 worker nodes. He had to shut the cluster down, and when he started, the ingress controllers came up on different workers, and so he's asking, let's see, so he needed to change the HA proxy configuration. Any recommendations to schedule those ingress controllers on the same nodes every time? And so I was going to paste a link about taints and tolerations.
Yep, that's Infra Nodes.
Yep.
Right? I'm looking for the question so that way I can post it up here.
Yeah, I got it right here. I lied. I have it right here.
So just to help with that, let's go to docs. So ingress controllers are considered an infra workload, which means that you can use them with infra nodes. So infra nodes are a special, quote unquote special. So they're basically a worker node that has a label and a taint that identifies them as infra nodes. So they're important for a couple of reasons. One, like for things like with ingress controllers, it means that we can assign workload to those. And two, you don't have to use entitlements for those. So they are quote unquote free. Infra node.
And if you're bent on continuing to use them for like user workloads and stuff too, like you can have an infra and worker label on it, so that way at least you can still schedule those ingress controllers on those nodes each time. So it's
yep, yeah. So what Johnny's saying there is just don't use the taint. Just use the label. So taints repel workload. So when you taint, so the requirements for using an infra node or not having an entitlement with an infra node is that you cannot run what we call customer applications, right? It can only be the qualified infra workloads. Why can I not find what I'm looking for here? Creating infrastructure nodes. Here we go. You can see there's a list in the documentation here. I'll post this into chat. There's a list in the documentation here of all the things that you are allowed to run on infra nodes. But basically all you're doing is adding a label, and then down here we add a taint, and then for whatever your workloads are, and somewhere down in here, anyways, I'll find the link. Oh, here, moving resources. It's right in front of me. Moving infrastructures to machine to infrastructure. So here we've got moving the router, and it walks exactly through how to configure those ingress controllers, the router, to run on our specific or your specific nodes. So you can see here it does a node selector. And then in this example, because they did create a dedicated infra node with a taint on it, you have to also add the toleration. And I'll post that link into chat here as well. So, yeah, that's a good one, and I've had that happen before. The alternative is whatever you're using for a load balancer. have it configured to point at all of your compute nodes. But that, of course, is very unwieldy and difficult to keep up with if you're doing, auto scaling with machine sets, or even if you're not, and your cluster has dozens of nodes in it, or something like that.
All right, and then to go in order, we'll get to the topic eventually. We've got a bunch of good questions.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. One more on ThinCSI from the official docs. vSphere supports vSAN. Just as usable as NFS for the same purposes. As far as I know, yes. I will admit I don't know the limitations or capabilities of vSAN file services. So it might be worth checking with your VMware folks just to see what they think of it. Johnny, maybe we could ping Dean. Dean's on Slack, so we can ping him and see if maybe he has any suggestions there. Dean's one of our peers over at VMware. He's been on the stream a couple of times, so we can see if he has any thoughts or suggestions on that. But off the top of my head, not knowing a whole lot about vSAN file services, like performance capabilities, that type of stuff, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
Let's see. I see Shomer. I don't know if that was.
So Shomer was asking about if I have a Helm chart for Apache Airflow. Basically, it's blowing up with the SCCs, right, for run as and FS. But he's asking how that could be overridden through a values file. It depends on if that chart has that parameterized, then you can just do like a dash set and then that parameter and then the new value, or through an actual values file, you just call it off the same way it's declared in that as a parameter is declared.
Yep. I wonder if you could also potentially specify the service account and basically use the service account and loosen. Sure, we'll use that term. Loosen the security so that way it can run as is. I would say that is the non-optimal solution. But yeah, it'll be dependent on the Helm chart.
All right, and then here's a question from Fayez, and Fayez also has another question, but we can go through this one.
How often do you recommend update clusters so that we can mitigate vulnerabilities at the earliest? Andrew's opinion, we should try to keep up with the latest ZStream for our minor release. So the cluster that I was using a moment ago, wherever it went to. So I'm on 4.12.7. So 4 is the major version, 12 is the minor version, 7 is the ZStream release, or XYZ is the way the engineering refers to them. So I'm of the opinion that we should keep up with the latest ZStream because that's where all of the security patches and stuff like that are applied. And those are generally applied, backported to all of the currently supported minor releases. So let's say that there's a security vulnerability that gets released, it gets fixed in 4.12.8. It would also be fixed in 4.11. I don't know what's next, 4.11.32, I think, or 4.10 whatever, and 4.9 whatever, and I think that's as far back as we go on support right now. I think 4.8 is out of support.
I think so, and 4.9 too.
Yeah,
4.9 is at the end of next month, I think.
Okay, yeah, so my suggestion is, at a minimum, especially for security stuff, keep up with the ZStream releases. Minor releases, so 4.10 to 11, 4.11 to 12, so on and so forth. Occasionally, there will be, I won't call it a security thing, again, like an RCOS patch or something like that, but rather it's a this feature or this capability has been upgraded and it removes this thing that was previously an issue that we had a patch for, or usually it's things like removing APIs or adding new functionality, as the case may be. But yeah, definitely the most important is keeping up with ZStreams. How often you do that is an organizational thing. The amount of effort between a ZStream and a minor release is going to be very subjective. So within a ZStream, there won't be any API changes or anything like that. API changes happen between the minor versions. So going from 4.11 to 4.12, or maybe it's 4.12 to 13. I don't remember when the next set of API removals happens. You're going to want to do a lot of extra testing and validation and verification that nothing's going to break. Whereas with a ZStream, it's the effort, or how do I phrase this? The act of doing the update is the same. You go in here, you click select a version, you click apply. It'll take the same amount of time, but because less things are changing in theory, it will have less impact on your applications. I hope I explained that well. Johnny, please bail me out.
No, I think you did good. It's a hard topic, and I like the the age old, like, it just depends. Like, do you have to be up to date on everything? Like, if you're going from 4.12 to 4.13, you might want to like just breathe a little bit and make sure that like nothing breaks. I think the next API deprecation for us is going to be, I think, at 14, maybe.
Okay.
I think, but I could be lying. So
Yeah, 4.8 to 4.9 was a big one.
Yeah,
I remember that. That was because that was the first one. So I think it took everybody by surprise isn't the right phrase, but it was the first time in like 15 or 20 Kubernetes releases that APIs had been removed. So
yeah,
our Hope 9, we have business insurance. Is that like malpractice insurance for doctors here in the US?
And Fias had one more question. I just posted it.
What happens if I run user workloads on Infra Nodes? So essentially, it would mean that you need to entitle the Infra Nodes. So if it happens by accident or something like that, I don't think it'll be a big deal. Verify with your account team. But it's one of those long running, like deliberately and deploying applications, stuff like that. It's just another worker that just happens to have a taint. It's limiting it to just those infra workloads is the key. Is there any way to share a cluster which needs to be encrypted both ways? I'm not sure I understand that question, Mary.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on what that means.
Yeah, if you could give us some clarification on what you're asking for, that would be helpful. I'm trying to think, maybe communicating between two clusters encrypted or something like that. Our Hope 9 vSphere service account requirement seems to be revised over the years. Yes, absolutely, that is a very good point. And I think it was you, our Hope 9, who sent us an email about that, about the permissions changing. So yeah, the big change happened in 4.9 or 4.10, whenever the CSI driver went GA. There was some changes to the vSphere or the vCenter service account that's used in order to accommodate that. I think there is a chance that will happen again with 4.13 or 4.13 when we do CSI importing, or what do they call it? Is it CSI importing? When they convert the entry volumes to CSI volumes. That would be the only thing that comes to mind as potentially changing that. I don't think the zonal stuff will have an effect on that. So if you don't know what I'm talking about there, so 4.12 in tech preview released, I just realized I'm still sharing my screen. Maybe it's in the release notes. Maybe that'll be the fastest way to find it. Zonal. We'll just scroll right on down here. Multizone installer provision infrastructure for vSphere. So I don't think that this changes the permission sets that are needed, because it's just reading tags off of the objects in vCenter. And I think the default permission set already enables tags at the global level. So, but yeah, definitely keep an eye on that. And if you're curious about where all of that is at, in the install docs, if we come all the way down here to installing on vSphere and then preparing to install, I think it's on this page. Nope, it'll be on the installing page then. It will walk through and it will tell you all of the permissions. Other than me scrolling here, we can do a search and we have this required vCenter account privileges, and you can see it walks through for each object and which permission is required. So what our Hope 9 is saying there is just go back and periodically revalidate that your your account uses those if you're using a restricted account. What could be a reason for volume resources to leave residual on worker nodes? Oops, my chat just jumped. Residual on worker nodes post deletion. That's an interesting one. I don't know if empty Dura resources, basically ephemeral storage, is cleaned up when the pod is deleted off the top of my head. It would make sense for it to be, so I don't know why it would leave something there. But for sure, it'll go back and it'll do garbage collection once it hits the thresholds, which is 90%, if I remember correctly, off the top of my head. It'll go back and it'll clean up the file system for sure at 90%. It will leave the container image, for example. I'm. If you could be like, when you say volume resources, please let us know if you're referring to something specific other than like an ephemeral, you used an empty dir in the pod definition and it left that whatever that was there. I honestly would have expected it to clean that up, so that might be worth doing a little bit of investigation.
Yeah, it sounds like it could be like a local volume or maybe like an NFS volume that gets spun up on that node. Or often causes df-h to hang on a worker node. Maybe it's leaving. Oh, that's an interesting one. Is it an NFS volume maybe, and it's not properly unmounting it? If that's the case, I would check kubelet logs, or let me rephrase that. If it's a CSI provisioned and managed volume, so like you're using NetApp Trident to mount a CS or an NFS volume, check the Trident logs. But I think they just use the regular NFS driver, if you will. And I think kubelet manages that. So you might also look in the kubelet logs to see if it's tossing any errors about like volume mounts or anything like that. All right. And then the next one is, I'm not gonna lie, I'm loving this right now. I think that this is amazing. Like
it's office hours. Like, this is what we're here for. I answer questions. I love it. Let's see. To get deployment costs like we do for VMs, was there more context to that?
That was it. Like I think they're trying to figure out if like chargeback. Yeah, is there a way to do chargeback with deployments and pods like there is with VMs?
Yes, maybe. If you have a connected cluster, you can use cost management. Which is a feature of, I don't even know if it shows up in my thing here. Am I still logged into somewhere? Nope. Sorry for clicking through tabs real quick. I was looking for the console. So console.redhat.com/OpenShift. I go here, I don't think I have any clusters deployed, so this probably won't show you very much. Yeah, I don't. But if we click this cost management, you can go in here and you can plug in like values. And yeah, see, it's not going to, I have literally no resources here, so it's not going to show us anything. But so long as it's a connected cluster, you can use this in order to go through and kind of track at some level what those things are costing. I don't know if it goes down to the individual pod level. It might be just at the cluster level, in which case you can probably use something like metrics. There is a I think it's a community thing. I'm trying to remember the name of it. There's a community like cost operator.
When we had Christina on, I'm trying to remember, I think she had a blog on it. Let me see if I can dig that up.
Here, cost management metrics operator generates and uploads OpenShift usage metrics. Koku, that's what it is. That's what I was thinking of. Although that one reads the same as the cost management metrics, so maybe I'm thinking of something different. Yeah, you can see there's various partners, Turbo, Termonomic. Turbo, which Turbo is now an IBM company. I don't know if you knew that, Johnny.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's been maybe about a year since they were acquired by IBM. So yeah, I think that there is a community operator. I see this kubecast thing. I'm not familiar with that one, but it looks like it might be helpful. Gerald, Koku is the upstream for OpenShift cost management. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Gerald.
Yeah,
so I don't know if that depends on Red Hat cost management, or if you can use those data or use that data, those metrics that it collects and aggregates for your own good or bad, depending on your perspective of cost management and chargeback. OpenCost.io is good looking. Would love to see it in OpenShift.
Oh, I clicked on the wrong one. I'm sorry. This is the one.
Yep. OpenCost. Yeah, I haven't looked at OpenCost. I don't know what. I'm not familiar with that one. So cost management. I've worked for a vendor for a while now, and I've always worked on the BU side. So when people ask me how much does your product cost, my answer is always, I don't know. Like, it's just free to me as an employee. I just plug in my credentials and it works. Because
Works on my place.
It's, I hate to say it's different for everyone, but it's different based on like 10,000 different factors all go into what the actual cost of an entitlement is, and I'm ignorant of 9,999 of them. So
yeah.
Let's see. Can I use machine sets with installation choice on any platform option? I'm going to say no, but yes. So if you use IPI, so let's go back to the docs here. So if I'm installing on any one of these platforms, AWS, which has this installing a cluster quickly, Azure, again, same thing, preparing to installing a cluster quickly. That's sort of their hint language that it's an IPI install. So anything that has an IPI installer, and now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know why I'm clicking on those when I can just show you the chart here. So any of these that have an IPI based install type will automatically use machine sets. So when you run the installer, it'll deploy the cluster. It'll use a machine set in order to deploy the worker nodes that are associated with that install. With UPI, it changes a little bit. So first, some install platforms, Nutanix comes to mind, do not have UPI. So with Nutanix, you either have IPI or you have a non-integrated platform agnostic install. There is no UPI. Red Hat Virtualization, when you install on Red Hat Virtualization using the UPI method, so if we come down here, installing with user provision infrastructure, this actually creates a non-integrated platform agnostic install type. For all of the other platform types that have a UPI install type, so excuse me, at least all the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, so vSphere, OpenStack, etc., UPI still deploys all of the integration pieces. So cloud provider, machine API, CSI, if there's one available, right? All of that other stuff gets deployed. So day 2, you can go in and you can create a machine set with all of the UPIs. The other thing that I'll point out, which is a language thing. So we call, where is it in here? Bare metal, IBM, where is it? Bare metal. So we have this, here we go. So installing on bare metal, installing a user provision cluster on bare metal. So bare metal IPI uses a cloud provider, a platform of bare metal. Bare metal UPI is really a non-integrated platform. So if we come over here and we scroll down to creating the Kubernetes manifest file. So here, sample install config. You see it's a platform none install type. So bare metal UPI, quote unquote, is actually a platform none. Rev UPI is actually a platform none. But otherwise, if it's a UPI install, it will have that platform integration and will have all of the parts and pieces you need there. Could you technically, even with UPI, create machine sets at install time? Yes. I would not recommend doing that. So the background there is If you go in and you do you create your install config, you do OpenShift install create manifests, and it'll spit out a bunch of YAML. You can go into the directory there, and I forget which one it is off the top of my head, but you can go in there and you can basically add in a machine set definition, and then do OpenShift install create ignition config, and it takes all of that YAML, all of those files, and it puts them into the appropriate ignition config files. So the reason why I say I don't recommend doing that is because it's effectively no different than doing it day 2, except that you're making the installation process more complex and therefore more fragile. Because if you have a typo or something in that machine set that you added in there and it fails, that could potentially cause the install to fail. And now you're having to restart the whole install process instead of just going in and, oh, look, I made a mistake here. Let me destroy that, YAML object or that machine set object and recreate it, if that makes sense. I don't know. I feel like I went off there for a minute, Johnny. I don't know if you got anything to add.
No, I don't. I not on that topic anyways. I do want to call out that I hit up Dean while you were going over the machine set stuff, and he replied back, and so I'm just going to post his answer here. But basically the gist of it is that it's supported, but it's limited. So he also provided a link that you can follow and get some more details on I don't know if workaround is the right word, but there's like it's a workaround. But yeah, it's all in the chat here. So if you need it, if especially for Shomer 2009, check it out and make sure that does the thing. And if not, hit Andrew and I up, and we'll get a hold of Dean. Oh, I think you're muted, Andrew.
You're right, I am. So you might want to pull out that link because it got cut off.
Okay.
For the folks on YouTube.
Got it.
Because YouTube cuts off after 200 characters. So yeah, that link is at the end of Dean's response for the folks on YouTube there, and that'll have some more details. Amira, I'm so sorry for butchering names. Amir Mahdi. Sorry to ask again, but will it throw zip or any other compressed file format which has some files in it? You need to have different permissions. It should just remove them. So kubelet is the one that manages the cleanup of that, and kubelet is it runs with root permissions as far as I know, which means that it has the ability to remove any and all of those files to clean up afterwards. I should say that is for ephemeral storage. So again, if your pod is deployed with an empty dir or something like that, if you're using a PVC, so say iSCSI, Fiber Channel, something like that, it's up to the CSI provisioner to manage that storage. So it would NFS as well, I should say. So once the pod terminates, it hands over to the CSI controller and basically says, "Hey, unmount this volume and do whatever you do with it." So at that point, the CSI provisioner would, maybe it formats it and resets it. Maybe it just unmounts it so that way it can be reused on a different node. If you're destroying the volume, it is left up to, so again, a PVC managed by a CSI operator or CSI provisioner. It's up to the CSI operator or a CSI controller on how it handles that. So I don't think there's a CSI provisioner for like a generic NFS, but again, I'll pick on like NetApp or Dell EMC or HPE or any of those. It would either just outright destroy the volume on the storage device or clean anything up and then destroy the volume, depending on what it's doing there. But it would be up to those individual providers. All right. So I think we worked through our backlog of questions, Johnny, which is awesome.
I'm not gonna lie, dude. Most excellent.
Yeah. it's great that we're an hour in and we've done nothing but answer questions, because I feel like this is I don't know, I get a lot of I find it very fun to learn things. I feel like I'm constantly learning things when I answer questions. So
Me too.
so yeah, so please keep questions coming in, whatever comes to your minds. That's why we're here. This is why it's called an office hours, because we're here to talk about anything and everything that you all want to talk about. We do have, as always, we have our topic, but don't let that stop you from asking about whatever it is you want to chat about. So let's talk a little bit about the production ready aspect. We'll chat about that while folks are formulating any questions that they might have. So we talked about this, or I talked about this a minute ago, of production ready means something different to everyone. And it is based off of a number of different factors. There's hard requirements, again, what the application needs, what your organization requires, and what your compliance or regulatory compliance mandates. So outside of that, I think that there's a number of different things that we want to take into account, that we want to consider and evaluate for ourselves as well as our organization, as maybe it should be added in the future or something like that. So I'll pause there. Johnny, please, again, bail me out.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when we go, back in the day when I was a consultant, like we would go and a lot of things are kind of like customer specific, like you mentioned earlier, compliance, like are you PCI DSS compliant? Do you just need to follow the STIG, or do you have to do, like, is there anything special that you have to do? Like most of my customers, just essentially all they had to have was STIG, and so as long as STIG was applied, it didn't matter. The other thing that I think we kind of find is people have different certificate strategies, so I have one customer that doesn't mind doing wildcard certificates. And then I have another customer that's like, oh, we absolutely cannot do that. We can do wildcard DNS, but we'd have to have a host certificate per route. And so it's things like that we need to be aware of, and that you need to be aware of. And that's what'll put you in that, like, the closer you get to production, right? That's what's going to get you pushed towards that. The other aspect is, some of the third party things that we look at is like, okay, do you have a time server that you're required to use? Do you have DNS servers that you need to use? And then if you do you know how to update those things? Do you actually know how to create a crony.conf that has your time servers applied to it? Do you understand the workflow of that? So you create the crony.conf, you encode it in base64, then you create a machine config, and then you apply it to the cluster. And then it'll cycle through if you created one for all of your nodes, it'll go through like the workers and then the machines, or the control plane nodes. And then that's how you would update the time server. So it's things like that. Some of the other things are like when you start talking about multiple clusters or multiple sites, do you have a global load balancer? Do you know how to set up that global load balancer? Or if you're using an F5, do you know how to set up the F5 to make it work? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I think one of the big ones for me, I think in line with that, like the global load balancer made me think of this. One of the big ones for me has always been metrics and monitoring. Like metrics is a lot like CI testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
We often don't know to have a CI test for something until it causes a problem. And then we go back and say, once we figure out that there's a problem, we go back and add the CI test. So that way we know not to do that again. Metrics and alerting is often the same. Hey, we had this issue. Now we need to make sure that we're collecting the metrics for it. We need to make sure that we have monitoring in place so that we get alerts when something goes wrong. So for as much as make sure that you have metrics and monitoring in place. And I think arguably the more difficult part of that is making sure that your thresholds are set appropriately. I say that, so I was a storage admin, right? And we go to our storage vendors and say, oh, like what is the maximum that we should allow our storage to fill up? At what point should we stop provisioning new storage in it? And the answer we would always get back was, we don't know. And it's like, well, what do you mean you don't know? Well, it depends on, like NetApp. Well, you can add more disks into the aggregate, so you can expand the capacity of that. So how long does it take you to, identify or add new disks to that aggregate in order to expand the capacity, in order to keep the consumers from being impacted? an hour, a day, a month, 6 months? So, and what's your threshold? Is it,
Hmm.
so, 90%. So at 90%, at this rate of increase, it will take us, 4 weeks to fill up. So that means that we have 4 weeks at the 90% mark to take action before it actually causes impact. So, you can kind of work back the same way, and then it gets into capacity planning. And now I feel like I'm scope creeping, but
No, but that's honestly, like when we go to a site, we do a discovery session, and or to a customer, we do a discovery session. We're asking all these same questions, right? Like, if you have to provision new storage, what is the turnaround time for something like that? If you have to implement a new firewall, or if you have to put in firewall rules, what's that turnaround look like? Is it a day, month?
DNS is a big one too.
DNS is huge, especially when you have external entities managing that DNS service. Like we'll go to a customer they're using the cloud, but it's managed by a third-party cloud provider. So we say, hey, we need this, and then they say, mother may I, to that third-party entity, and then we have to wait for that workflow to trickle down before the change gets made. So there's a lot of things. My dogs are going insane right now.
It's your dog's turn to.
I'm sorry.
Mine were in here shaking earlier, so
yeah, my bad. Like I don't even know what they're barking at, but
dogs, they don't need anything to bark at.
Yeah, and the little one especially, like he's just like wind. But yeah, those things, like I think, because that dictates your velocity, right? That dictates how fast you're going to move while you're on site with the customer, and you as a customer, that dictates how fast you're going to be able to add applications to your cluster. Because if it takes a month to get a DNS entry made, then you're either going to stock up on apps that you need to deploy and do it all at once, or you're going to have a very strategic planning on, like, okay, January we're doing app A, February app B, whatever.
Yeah. So it's funny how much those type of dependencies can play into your application or your cluster capacity planning, because like you have to count back from at what point does it become critical, and now how long is it going to take me to resolve that situation, and then basically subtract that. All right, I feel like I look like I'm slightly distracted because I'm opening up a command prompt because I want to try and answer the question from Fayaz here about is there any way to see which where to go? Is there any way to know which certificates will be expiring soon?
Oh, that's admin related changes. The Fayaz just got a lot of great questions. Yeah, the other one too is
let's check.
Wait, what?
It's the CRD for certificates. There's CSR, but there's another one.
I have no idea. I can't remember.
Anyways, go ahead. Finish your thought.
No. I was going to say the other thing that we've run into a lot is authentication. Like if you're connected, then you have all of the OAuth things at your hands, right? Like you can use like a GitHub or even Google or whatever. But internally, you're either using something like Active Directory, LDAP, HT password. Hopefully not kubeadmin. Kubeadmin should be if you're still using kubeadmin, then you're not ready for production. That should be like the first trigger that you're not ready.
Yeah. Oh, well, certainly in our world, right?
Yeah.
What comes to mind whenever I hear kubeadmin as being, the deployment method for Kubernetes clusters, I don't necessarily think there's anything intrinsically wrong with using kubeadmin. I think that it covers just a very small portion of, the deployment and configuration process. And usually the one that comes to mind for me is always operating system patching.
Yeah.
We had this, I'll call it a problem, but OpenShift with OpenShift 3 was the same way, right? Kubernetes and the underlying operating system were decoupled, and you updated and managed them in a decoupled way. So, with 4 CoreOS, they're now tied together. You can now, now they're authoritatively managed together. OpenShift, the machine config operator, manages the operating system patching for CoreOS. If you're using RHEL worker nodes, you still have that thing of, separately managing RHEL patches and stuff like that. So Safir, I was trying to answer this question for you, and I'm failing miserably. I thought that there was a specific CRD that was for the certificates. but now I'm forgetting. I cannot figure out what it is. There's of course CSRs, right? But CSRs are generally going to be managed automatically by the cluster. Really, all of the certificates should be. But I swear that there is a command that we can use in order to pull those, and it is completely escaping me. I wonder if there's a KCS on it. So, anyways, we'll take that one for follow up if we can't figure out here on the stream, and then we'll talk about it next week during the top of mind segment. So that way we can get that answer for you. Yeah, R-Hope9 laughing at you, Johnny, for saying your customers only had to follow as the STIG.
Yeah, that's dude. True story though.
Someone deleted a secret in the cluster. Where do I check exactly who did it and when? That would be in the audit logs. So make sure that you have, where is it? Where's my documentation? Here, the audit log policy. So all of this stuff, this page here controls that. You can see here's the API server. Just make sure that you have somewhere to collect those and be able to review them. So that may mean either setting up forwarding over to your existing log solution, Splunk, etc., or making sure that you have OpenShift logging deployed, whether it's the Elasticsearch or the Loki version. And
we got this question.
Yep, I'll share this link in the chat here. It's hard to control over 100 clusters. Is there anything like master cluster thing to control all of them at once, because it would make production more easier? So the corporate response would of course be something like ACM, and using ACM to do policy-based management of your clusters. So ACM, I wish I had an instance up that I could show you, but ACM basically brings all of those clusters in. It has an agent that runs in the cluster. You can go in and create a policy that says, I want this configuration, which is a collection of Kubernetes YAML objects, to be applied to every cluster that matches these labels, these selectors.
Yeah.
And the selector could be like star, could be all, or only clusters that are running in AWS, or only clusters that are running in Azure on these 3 regions. There's a whole bunch of different selectors inside of there. So that's certainly one option, is doing like policy-based management. So that way it will roll out and it will apply those. I think it's also really cool because you can join clusters in, and it will, if they match the label selectors or the selectors for those policies, it'll automatically apply those. So as soon as the cluster joins, it starts getting configuration that you want to have applied to it.
Yeah, we do something similar with the multi-cloud GitOps, where as soon as you add like the cluster group label, it'll take that config in, and then it'll deploy OpenShift GitOps, and then it just takes off from there.
Yeah, that was going to be my second suggestion, was to throw the ball over to you and suggest GitOps. GitOps is certainly an option as well, whether you're using the OpenShift GitOps flavor of Argo CD or upstream Argo CD. I feel like both of those solutions also work across multiple different Kuberneteses. So, I'm a realist, right? Not everybody has only OpenShift for their Kubernetes. And ACM does work with quote unquote vanilla Kubernetes, as well as Argo CD. Yeah, R-Hope9. Yeah, has to be the right STIG. The the guy from Top Gear with the white helmet. That's what I always think of too. Yeah. Audit logs on OpenShift are huge. Yes, they are, Jamie. Yes, they are. Be prepared for the amount of stuff that comes in, because like with the API server, every API call from everywhere and anywhere in the cluster gets put into those logs. So as your cluster increases, not just in size, but in quote unquote busyness, it will generate a lot of logs. So just be prepared for that. I think you can set up filters on what gets forwarded.
You can,
but yeah, and I think that data is stored on the master nodes or the control plane nodes anyways. So I don't think you have to take into account like additional disk capacity, but I might be wrong. So that might be worth considering. Did I miss any chat up here? Is there any way to specifically track the admin-related changes that happened in the cluster today or yesterday? Outside of the audit log, I don't think so. That's a really interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think back to some of the tools that I used to use as a VMware administrator, which was the last time I had a large number of clusters, and even individual nodes that I wanted to track. We had created automation that would effectively, at least for the things that we knew of, it would go in and check what was the configuration from day to day and tell us if there had been any changes. But it was targeted. And it of course grew over time as we discovered configuration drift in certain things. So within OpenShift, I know some things. So you can tell when, for example, somebody logs in through SSH or debugs into a node and makes changes using things like the file integrity operator. The audit logs, of course, would be one way that you can look at that. Whether or not there are any existing tools or queries or something like that where you can specifically call out when a admin action is taken, I don't know. And then beyond that would be something like, again, Ansible or something like that you can use to validate that the things that you know of, the things that you are wanting to track and validate, adhere to the way you expect them to look. And I say each one of these things is a little bit outside. I think, you may have been thinking, oh, machine config operator. Well, if you change the machine config operator, if you add a machine config operator is just going to make it look like that. But how do you know that you wanted that machine config to change, right? And if you're, another admin on a team of admins and somebody else changes a machine config, how do you know they changed that machine config and it wasn't always supposed to be like that? That I think that's the core of the question here. So yeah, I don't have a good answer there. If anybody knows of anything, anything in the community or anything like that would help, that would be interesting to know. But I do feel like, at a minimum, for things like tracking files on the file system, the file integrity operator is a good option.
That's one like in mind. That's the one that was going kind of ringing off.
Argo CD, again, GitOps and all of that, you can see when those changes happen. If you're using GitOps and somebody goes in and changes something, GitOps will set it back to the way that it's supposed to be. And if somebody goes in and changes the Git repository, of course, Git will have a record of that. So excuse me, I got a hiccup all of a sudden. You'll at least be able to see those types of things depending on the tools that you're using. But that does require discipline to use the tools as well.
I'm just trying to make sure that we didn't miss any questions.
Oh, Echo Charlie, there's an ACM policy to alert for expiring certificates. That's good to know. You told me to turn on Do Not Disturb. It must have expired because I just got an alert. I only turned it on for an hour because I was in a rush. Yeah, storage is... Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to read Fayaz's comment here about storage is what he's worried about when enabling audit logs. Again, I think that those logs are generated anyways. It's just whether or not they actually get sent somewhere other than the control plane nodes. So I don't think, and I keep using the word think because we should definitely verify this, but I don't think it requires any additional storage space on the control plane node disks. Rather, it would be all of that data that's being sent over to your logging solution. And I wonder if I think that it uses the same, FluentD or what's the other one, Johnny? Whatever the log forward is that one is FluentD, the other one is something that I can't think of at the moment. It's either too much or not enough caffeine. I don't know. Anyways, and then, so I think you can configure filter rules at that level to select or exclude. What was that?
FluentBit.
FluentBit, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
I I think you can select at that level to choose to include or exclude specific things. Can it handle over 200 clients? I don't know what that is related to. What can handle
The logging.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, logging is a hard one. Once you get up into the top end of the scaling spectrum, if you're deployed into AWS or Azure, there's their native logging solutions which you can forward everything over to as well, and they scale very nicely. There's several blog articles on cloud.redhat.com/blog that talk about how to do that.
Yeah, we used to push things to I can't remember what it's called now over in AWS, but we'd go through like Firehose and then push that over, and it would just push the streams in.
Yeah, invited me to their data center. I saw a program which was logging every admin or root mover user move. Yeah. Was it Rel 8 that introduced the session replay thing, Johnny?
I think
Do you remember
so,
that? Yeah, where like when you log in, like when you SSH in, if the feature is turned on, it records like every command, everything that's happening in that session. And essentially, the auditor can go back and replay your session that while you were logged into the Rel node on that host, which was both interesting and kind of big brothery.
Terrifying.
But I get it. It's one of those like, I'm not doing anything, weird or nefarious or anything like that. On the other hand, I might unintentionally do something that would help to identify like, oh, why did this node go down? Why did this, this error happen? Oh, it's because Sully typed in this command and he's, not the smartest, so now that we know what caused it, we can go back and fix it more easily. It's not just, for a security type of thing in my,
Yeah, for me, I think it's more embarrassment about people seeing how bad I type, like, and really like, because it sounds like I'm typing fast, but I'm nailing that backspace like crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that before Rel 8 with sudo replay. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I'm terrible at typing too. And I can't talk and type, as I've said many, many times.
Oh, yeah.
So jumping back over, y'all please keep chatting. Please keep asking questions. Jumping back to our topic here for production readiness. One of the things that I wanted to, open up for discussion is, and I hinted to this earlier, is administrator processes around managing the cluster. We briefly talked about updates before and stuff like that. How do we know what is the process for doing an update? Sure, at the technical level, it's going in and pressing like clicking 3 buttons and doing the thing. But what are the things that surround that? Do you need to tell your application teams that something is happening? And again, that's going to be very dependent. Some applications are quote unquote cloud native, right? They're fully 12 factor and, pick your buzzwords and all that other stuff. And they don't care if, pods get terminated and restarted and cluster nodes are, popping in and out and all this other stuff. And sometimes they do. I've seen a number of applications, a number of customers with applications where, they're using a database and there's multiple instances of that, but they have, I'll pick on MySQL because I can remember the terms. They'll have one that is the write master, right? It is the one where all of writes happen to, and then reads get distributed out. They get sharded out amongst other replicas. So they're very protective of that one instance because that's a key component. But the others are less important. Sure, yeah, we can bounce those around all you want. So taking into those types of taking into consideration application things that are affecting that would, man, I got to string this sentence together. Taking into account administrator cluster actions that would affect applications. I will also say that applies in the inverse. So let's say that you're using a cluster deployed to vSphere. So do you have the awareness, the processes in place and the relationships with your virtualization administrator team so that they know that, hey, before we update to vSphere 8, we need to check in with the OpenShift team because as of right this moment, OpenShift 8 isn't technically supported, or excuse me, vSphere 8 isn't technically supported with OpenShift. Hey, we, when I was a VM admin, we just YOLO'd out VMware hardware changes, right? Oh, look, VMware released a new hardware version, and we had a PowerShell script that would just go through and set all of them to update on next reboot. And should you do that? With OpenShift, it shouldn't hurt anything. It should be okay, but it might not be, right? It might unexpectedly cause a longer reboot. That was one that we did encounter several times, especially with Windows servers, right? You update the VMware hardware version, and then Windows wants to fiddle with a bunch of drivers and stuff like that. So as an OpenShift admin, I'm expecting to do a cluster update, and my node reboots take on average, say, 75 seconds. And then all of a sudden they take twice that. And my maintenance window now gets completely blown. And it was all because, well, the VMware team did a harmless hardware upgrade.
So, yeah. I had a customer where they were updating. I don't want to say what kind of hardware they're using for their storage, but they're updating the drivers on the storage, and they needed to reboot. And so they were just thinking like, oh, okay, well, no big deal. Rebooted it, and OpenShift. VMs in general, they need storage, right? And so like when your storage is hosted on the platform that just got balanced, it was awesome. Yep. It's in their mind, right? I mean, it's exactly what you just said. It was a harmless update. They did it. They just apply restart now. Didn't think anything of it, and it killed everything.
It's funny. I think I was a NetApp customer, and I think a lot of NetApp customers had to train their network teams, don't randomly reboot routers.
Oh my God, yes.
Because the network team, they're like, oh, we reboot the router. What happens? A couple of lost packets, maybe maybe some connection takes an extra second or 3. Well, no, when you've got, you're using an NFS storage for your VMware empire, you've got hundreds or thousands of VMs, and all of a sudden everything blips for 3 to 5 seconds. Like, that's a bad day.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and if they don't save their running config on their switch and they reboot and like, oh, that poor channel's gone now. Like,
I'm not saying I've never done that before. That's why I'm not a network admin.
Oh man.
Let's see. I'm reading our Hope 9's comments here. Make sure SLA map with your supplier's SLA. Yep, and you collect SLI, create alarms for SLO. All of these. See, nice of you to link the SRE.Google thing. All of those things are to me. What's the UK government thing? The certification for IT ITIL.
Oh,
that's where I learned all of those acronyms. Was from the ITIL folks, and I don't even know what ITIL stands for now.
No, me either. Somewhere in America though, our Hope 9 just made Hillary's day.
Yeah, so. Information Technology Infrastructure Library. So yeah, it originated with the UK government and became a standard and all of that. And many years ago, when I worked with the government, they wanted us all to have those certifications and all be, the infamous and amazing CMDB, the Central Management Database, or whatever, Configuration Management Database.
Oh yeah,
and change the CAB, the change approval board. Yeah, it's been like 15 years since I had to worry about all of that. But
oh yeah, you bring it back.
Yeah,
bad memories.
I was gonna say, I don't know if they're good or bad, but they're memories. Let's see. Yep. If you're not fluent, okay. I don't think I missed any of those things. Yeah, America is really good. I don't know what we're good at, but we're good at something.
Oh, I said somewhere in America. Hillary's having a great day now from all the SRE talk.
Oh yeah. Let's see. There was another thing that I wanted to bring up with regard to production readiness. What was it? Disaster recovery. I feel like that's a topic that comes up a lot, right, in various ways. It's interesting to me that in a world of cloud native applications, stateless applications, sometimes disaster recovery isn't always the first thing that people think about. Application teams will sometimes take the approach of like, oh no, it's all stateless. We just redeploy the pods, right? And the application comes back. It doesn't matter if the cluster is there. I would argue that there is always more nuance than that. Mm-hmm. Where are those container images coming from? Being a big one. I talked to one customer, and their thing was, well, yeah, our disaster recovery plan is basically we stand up a new cluster and we, basically rebuild the application. And my question to them was, how long does that take? Because you go and you create your build pipeline and it has to go and clone the repository and then build the application. Well, building the application means pulling down some additional container images, and then whatever the dependencies are, Python, Java, whatever, pulling in all of those dependencies and then going through and actually building and running tests and doing all these other things. And repeat that by 60 or 80, however many applications that you've got that are all doing it at the same time. And even basic things like, can your internet connection support that much like pull coming down like
all at once?
Yeah. So I would argue that disaster recovery, should be a part of production readiness, even if it's just to say, oh yes, we're not going to do this or we're not going to do that. We're not going to, a couple of weeks ago, we did the etcd restore test. We're not going to go that far. We're just going to do these things. I would argue it is an important part. But maybe that's just the old infrastructure guy in me.
Yeah, I feel like when we were doing, at our old customer, like part of our SSP security plan was like we had to have, like, okay, if this production service goes down, how do I fall back and how do I recover? Like, what's my recovery procedure for that? But that could have been closer to before I left. But that's always been something, right? Or how do I do a continuity of operations, right? How do I move the service from site A to site B smoothly?
Yeah. I worked with a university once. It was when I worked for a storage vendor, and their DR plan, the way that they tested it was literally 6 months out of the year, they would run from one site and they would push the button and flip over to the other site. And just every 6 months they would flip back and forth. It was an interesting real world test.
Yeah.
For them, they always tested. I felt so bad for their administrators. It's the week of July 4th here in the US and the week of Christmas here in the US. Why? Because as a university, there is nobody doing any college courses.
Yep.
So that was when their IT guys had that opportunity. That was, I don't know, years and years ago. I used to do a podcast, and we had Gene, man, names are hard sometimes. And I don't have the book right behind me. Yeah, Gene Kim. I normally have the book right behind me, so I can't pull it out and look at it. It's still, I haven't fully moved my office yet. So we had him on the podcast and we were talking about, how does DevOps, what does it mean to administrators? What's the impact? And, his answer was great. And, he replied back, it gives humanity back to IT operations, because you're no longer, only doing patching and updates, at the wee hours of the morning or on holidays when, the rest of your family is, or the rest of your peers are, enjoying whatever celebrations or whatever it happens to be, instead, because everybody is involved, because it's this now group thing and everybody considers these things, it's much easier, much more common to do those at more humane times. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Chaos Monkey. R-Hope9, it's interesting you say that. There is an interesting thread going on inside of Red Hat with some of our engineering folks around chaos testing with OpenShift and Kubernetes applications. So I think it would be interesting, Johnny, maybe we should consider having a chaos testing type of topic come up at some point. Yeah, for sure. And anybody who isn't familiar with Chaos Monkey, I think Chaos Monkey was created by Netflix. If I remember, like the literal Chaos Monkey. And it was, it's a chaos testing tool that goes in and just randomly destroys things and basically tests and validates that your application, your infrastructure, or whatever is able to recover from that. And it happens all of the time in production, so that you're never surprised when a node fails and, oh no, it took down production, that type of stuff. And what happens if the internet is down at the same time? Panic. R-Hope9. At least that's what my kids do. My kids don't know how to function.
That's when the dumpster fire little icon goes by the screen.
Yeah. Hey, I can't. I joke, but really, it's just as much my fault as it is theirs. Right? There's, my oldest is 15. He has never not been in a world without smartphones.
Yeah.
Like he was born the same year that the iPhone was released.
Mm-hmm.
So, for them it's, the TV isn't working because we stream everything. Okay, well, I'll just use my phone. Oh, the phone isn't working. Oh, I'll use my computer. Oh, wait, the computer, like they don't, like, that's just their life. Yeah. So, it's like when we poke fun at younger generations for not knowing what the save icon is, right? The floppy disk.
Yeah.
I went to visit a customer. They're a VoIP provider, and I walked into their office. This is literally like 3 weeks ago. Walked into their office, and they had an old rotary phone, like pick up the phone, like hold the thing. And I was talking with their director of IT, and I was like, I think it is amazing that you all have like an old school telephone that I know is connected on the back end to VoIP and all this. And he just laughed. He's like, I never thought of it that way. I'm like, yeah, like I'm looking around there, and it's young people IT. I'm like, I wonder how many of these people have actually used, an old school phone. I haven't in 20 something years. So,
yeah.
Anyways, Johnny, you got anything else to add for our topic today?
No, not really. I mean, I think between the questions and what we've been talking about, I think we've honestly covered everything. So it's really good today too. It was awesome.
Yeah, I'll one just occurred to me that I think is an interesting one, and I want your perspective on this, Johnny. Documentation. And I don't mean like the OpenShift documentation. I mean like documenting your configuration and who is responsible for what. And I think sometimes we take that for granted, or let me rephrase that. Sometimes it comes automatically if you're using something like GitOps. But yeah, documentation is a big one.
It's huge. And, like something, I mean, and I'll be completely transparent, right? In the last year and a half that I've been on this team, something that I've learned a lot from one of my coworkers, Michaela, is that like your git commit message. I used to just put like updated config file. I mean, I still do it because I'm lazy as hell, but he puts a lot of detail in it. Like, hey, I made all of these changes. Here's why I made these changes. This fixes this, that kind of thing. And so instead of like having like a Google Doc out there that's got that, like he puts it all in the git commit message or in the PR. So that way you can go back and look at that and review it and then actually go to the correlating file that got changed, so as much as I hate doing documentation, I understand the importance of it. It is 100% key. And the call book, right? Who do I call when this is happening? I think that's super important, because if you at least know like the general area to call, you're going to get resolution that much faster because you're going to get the right people involved.
Yeah. And Nassim very serendipitously, chimed in. And I think it's something that aligns exactly with what you were just saying, which is, hey, what's the run book for certain scenarios? I say that not everybody reacts the same in a crisis. And crisis is a broad term that covers many different things. So when we're talking about like production, running an OpenShift cluster, hosting production applications, that type of stuff, what happens if it's degraded? And some people will just panic, and I don't know what to do. And having a run book, having something to help them get through that, even if step one is call so and so and ask them what to do next, that's fine. I was in the military, right? And the military, we had gosh, I just had the word in my head. What is the books that we used to create? The procedures, standard operating procedure.
SOPs. Yeah,
the SOPs. And it is literally that. If you see this, do this. And they are designed, I was, 18, 19 years old. They're designed for me, who is a complete and utter idiot in everything that I am doing. But I've been sat in front of this console that has, millions of dollars and does all kinds of fancy, cool stuff to be able to operate that somewhat effectively. So when this light and this light and this light turn red, turn to page 17 and follow the procedure. So Nassim, to your point, identifying what those scenarios are, having some sort of workflow, some sort of document, something that helps people to understand what to do. That's a really good point.
Yeah, it is. And if you go back to like when we were talking to Hillary about SRE stuff, and when we had Rick Rackrow and those guys on, right? It's coming in. It's that person that comes in at 3 o'clock in the morning. Yep. eyes glazed over. They just woke up. You know what I mean? Like hair's a hot mess. Nothing's going right. It's having that set of things that they can look at and just kind of like, okay, let me just get myself acclimated to the situation. Let me get going, and then let the gears kick in, and then that's when you can really take over. Yeah, they're important. It's important.
Yeah. Yeah, our Hope 9, I like your comment there. Seeing Gen Y or Z or Alpha now dial a rotary phone. I had a few years ago when my youngest, who is now 9, she was, I don't know, 3 or 4 years old. I had this very strange conversation with my wife of like, like neither of our older two had phones of their own, cell phones of their own or anything like that. I'm like, well, what happens if we're like out, they're with a babysitter, whatever, and something happens to the babysitter? Like, babysitter's phone is probably going to be locked. They're not going to know how to unlock it. They're not going to know how to use the emergency feature. Like, maybe we should get like a cell phone that just sits at the house all the time that they can use. And then I'm sitting there thinking to myself, isn't this just a house phone? Like, isn't this just a regular old? It's no longer, nothing is POTS anymore.
Yeah.
But it was this weird full circle thing of, everybody has their own phone and it's always there and always connected to, well, maybe we should have a common phone in the house. And,
it's not a bad idea.
Now my kids are old enough that they all have their own phone, and it's sad.
We went to the gas station, and there's a young person pumping gas, and their mom gave them like some cash, and they're like, all right, here you go. And so the kid's looking at the pump and just looking at like this $20 bill and was like, what do I do with this? And her mom was like, dude, you go inside and pay you pay at the register. But it was so funny watching, like, just you could see the brain, the gears were like just grinding hard. Yeah.
Yeah. If I ask, how often do Red Hat ZStream? I guess I can show this. How often do Red Hat ZStream releases happen? So generally speaking, so there's a release pipeline that happens. So more or less every week there is a ZStream that is created, unless something in the pre-release pipeline causes that to not happen. So they do a bunch of coding, right? They do a bunch of commits, and then I'm using fictitious days of the week because it's convenient. So Monday they make a cut and they say, we're going to make a build. If that build fails, then essentially they go back and fix it. And then the following Monday, they try again. So if that build succeeds, it gets given a new ZStream release. So 4.11.912. As soon as that build finishes, it becomes available on the candidate channel. So candidate releases are not supported, but they happen most of the time every week. So the candidate releases sit in the channel for, I think it's typically 1 week, maybe 9 days, something like that. I don't remember. I'm going to say a week. After a week, assuming there are no issues found, hey, we were testing this, or, somebody tried this and, it's a breaking issue, that candidate release will get promoted to fast. So once it reaches the fast channel, it is now fully supported, and anybody can go in and apply that to their cluster and be fully supported with that. Sometime after that, I'm going to again use a week just because it's a convenient time measure. So approximately a week after that, again, assuming no issues are found where it causes that update edge to be pulled, it gets promoted into the stable channel. So most of the time we see this with things like CVEs. Hey, there was a CVE released. It released today. It will be somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks later, unless they do some sort of emergency, like it's a super important blah, blah, blah. But generally speaking, it is 2 to 3 weeks later, depending on precisely when the CVE releases and their build cycle and all that, that would be fixed or pushed out into a OpenShift ZStream release. So I hope that answers the question. And I think there's a KCS about that. I'd have to dig it up. So yeah, Y updates are minor updates. So 4.10, 4.11, 4.12. Those are, I won't say that they're hard tied, if that makes sense. Like they have a hard dependency on a Kubernetes release. Like we release at the same cadence, approximately every 4 months or 3 releases a year. But it's not like, Kubernetes 1.27 releases on, April 1st, and by May 1st, OpenShift, whatever version that would be, uses that. I would say historically, so OpenShift 3. Where's the KCS? There's a KCS that lists like all of the OpenShift to Kubernetes versions. And one of the early OpenShift versions, I want to say like 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, something like that, we did skip a Kubernetes version. And of course, OpenShift 3.8 was never released. We went straight from 3.7 to 3.9.
3.9, yep.
But yes, generally speaking, we do sequentially follow Kubernetes releases. Andrew's suspicion, and I actually had an email chain about this recently. My suspicion is that we won't be skipping any more Kubernetes releases. I have no grounds, no basis, no authority, like no inside knowledge or anything like that. I think that because of API deprecations, right? Kubernetes is now deprecating and removing APIs. So if we start jumping Kubernetes versions, it's going to make that immensely more complex for you all, for our customers.
Yeah.
And therefore us in support and all that other stuff. So my personal suspicion is we wouldn't do something like that. Maybe we could skip an OpenShift version for whatever reason. I'm sure there could be one. We don't release OpenShift 4.17. We go straight from 4.16 to 4.18.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that could happen, but I don't know that we would skip a Kubernetes version for a couple of different reasons.
And it's moving so fast now compared to back then, right? Like with OpenShift 3, like it was moving fast then, but like it's lightning fast now. It's so crazy.
Yeah, I think the 3 annual releases for Kubernetes helped with that.
Yeah.
I also think, the other reason why I don't think that we would skip a Kubernetes version is EUS. Because with EUS doing the accelerated updates, so 4.10 to 4.12, the way that works is you pause the compute nodes and then you update the control plane from, so I don't remember the versions. I think 4.12 is Kubernetes 1.25 and 4.10 is Kubernetes 1.23.
Yes.
So your control plane at that point would be 2 Kubernetes versions ahead of your compute nodes. And that is sort of the border, or that is the maximum number of versions that they can be apart before things start to break. So if we were to skip a version, so let's say hypothetically OpenShift 4.13 went from Kubernetes 1, so 4.12 is 1.25. Let's say 4.13 jumped Kubernetes 1.26 and went straight to 1.27. And then 4.14, the next EUS release, if you wanted to do a fast forward update at that point, it would mean that you're Kubernetes wise going 3 versions, and that wouldn't work, right? That would break that capability. So 2 big reasons in Andrew's head why I don't think we would have a skip like that, like we did have it had at least once before. So hopefully that makes sense. And I realize I went off on a tangent there. So Fayaz, just to finish answering your question about, I'll show it back up here again. So ZStream every week or bi-weekly, it varies based on whether or not those releases get promoted. So it is possible to go, while most of the time it is roughly every week, it is possible to go 2 or even 3 weeks between ZStream releases, depending on whether or not they get pulled for various reasons. For example, in the early 4.9 days, there was some issues with OpenShift and VMX.NET 3 devices on vSphere, where there was a kernel driver issue or something like that in whatever RHEL release we were using. And so they had several ZStream releases that just got pulled. They didn't make it all the way through. They didn't make it out of candidate because it didn't fix that issue. So we went like a month or a month and a half without having a ZStream release while they patched that bug and then eventually got it out there. When Red Hat stops thinking about a ZStream release for a minor version, literally when it goes out of support. And as long as the release is supported, and you can tell which releases are supported. Let me turn this back on. You can tell which releases are supported from the console here. If you go to, so I'm on console.redhat.com/OpenShift, and I go to releases, and it'll tell you, so 4.8, so 4.8 is currently in extended support, and you can see that those will continue to grow, but 4.7 is no longer supported. It is now end of life, so there will no longer be any ZStream releases. So, but yeah, that's when we stopped doing those. And if you were to look at OpenShift 3, Johnny, do you know off the top of your head what like release version or release ZStream release we're on with 3.11? It's in the hundreds.
I have no idea. I think the last time I used it was like 3.11.93 or 193 or something like that. Like it's been so long.
For your ambitions to do with a bare metal cluster, you have to add hardware firmware to the chaos to keep track of. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Our Hope 9. Both firmware for like your network adapters, fiber channel adapters, all of those other things. But also drivers. It is possible now with CoreOS layering to be able to add in custom drivers and stuff like that. So yes, another factor to keep track of and test when you're doing all of those things. I was actually working on some things to be aware of or things to take into account when you're using OpenShift deployed directly to physical servers, and firmware management was one of the things that had come up. So if anybody else has any thoughts or suggestions on it, don't hesitate to share. But yeah. So yeah, I don't think I have anything else. I'm looking at the list of things that I had tallied up here, things to talk about. Kind of the last thing that I'll add in, the last thing, the last of the last things, is in the documentation, there's a page. I will post it first into chat here, and then I will bring it up over here in my browser. So there's a whole segment of the documentation with this post-installation configuration. And in particular, this overview page kind of collects all of these things. I know we've talked about these set of pages here on the stream before, but from a technical perspective, right, things that I need to configure perspective, this is one of the places where you can go to kind of start looking through and identifying all of the things that you might want to configure. If I'm going through and I need to get ready to for my users to join, so understanding identity provider configuration and configuring RBAC. Here's an RBAC overview and how all of that works. Setting up and managing for registry, so that way your users, if they're using builds or whatever, they're able to go in and use those things. So from an actual execution of OpenShift configuration, this is a really great set of resources. Borderline checklist, I'll say.
Yeah, I actually had the same link open, for starting, because we use this all the time. Every time you jump in to help another customer do something, we pretty much start here. This is awesome.
Yeah. Very much like to see that list. Yeah, I am hoping that we will be able to publish that. So it's been a minute since I published any blog posts over on cloud.redhat.com. So I'm hoping I can turn it into a blog post and talk about some of those things. Like everything, OpenShift on bare metal is a trade-off. There's, for example, you're using physical servers, which means that there is no hypervisor layer in between. So you can, for lack of a better term, recoup the virtualization overhead. That 1 or 2 or 3%, whatever performance that you lose by virtualizing. But it means that it comes at the cost of things like the ease of scalability. How many organizations just have a bunch of servers laying around that they can, they're either sitting in a rack powered off, so that with like IPI, you can, bare metal IPI, you can dynamically join them to the cluster, or, have them sitting powered off in a warehouse somewhere that you can just go in and put into a rack. So definitely trade-offs in that respect. Johnny, what do we got going on next week since we're at the end here?
Yeah, so I talked to Dean, for one of the questions that we got earlier, and he said that he's free next week. So because we were still waiting on some confirmation for next week, so I figured we'll just bump that out. So Dean from VMware is going to be here next week. If there's anything that you want to talk about or that you want Dean to answer, let me know and I'll pass it on to him, or show up next week, even better, and ask then. And then the week after that, on April 12th, we have Rosemary from HashiCorp coming on to talk about secrets management in OpenShift. So
Nice.
got a nice couple weeks coming up, and then I think after that, or maybe at some point after that, we're going to have KCP folks come on, and then they're going to talk about KCP. So
yeah, and
just got to get them locked in.
4.13 may or may not be that far away.
Oh man! Oh my God!
Don't forget about that one. I haven't seen when the what's new is scheduled. We need to check on that, Johnny. When the what's new in 4.13 stream is. So yeah, that'll be keep an eye out for those to get scheduled. As always, Johnny and I are always on those streams as well, and then we usually spend a couple of our streams talking about what's new for admins. So yeah, so a couple of interesting weeks coming up, number of interesting weeks coming up actually, and then by that time we'll be getting close to Summit and all that.
Yep.
So it's already like I'm already planning out in like June, Johnny. We're already halfway through the year in my head. How'd that happen?
Man, it's crazy. It's it's crazy.
All right. Well, I don't know if you heard that roar a second ago. That was my stomach. So that means it's definitely time for so thank you, everybody. This has been just amazing. We really love all of the chat, all of the comments, all the questions. We love that a lot. That's why we're here. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach out to us via email. As soon as I find my link, at andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or Johnny, Jonny at redhat.com. You're welcome to reach out to us anytime. We'll do our best to answer those questions. I think I've got a couple in my inbox that I've been overwhelmed by email this week, so I'm lagging behind, but I promise you I will respond. Let's see, Amir Mahdi had to change clusters, and after we removed clusters, clients were using old ones. That's an interesting one. Perhaps a DNS issue. The only thing I can think there is maybe like if the old clusters, the original clusters were still running somewhere, maybe it was like a DNS issue or a load balancer issue or something like that started directing traffic back to the original cluster. Oh yeah, our Hope 9 thinking the same thing, load balancers with cache. Server only had 2 terabytes of memory, cluster was 25 terabytes, so it's not possible to load all the cluster at once. Yeah, that's an interesting physics problem that I would be curious to learn about. So yeah, I would say investigate from a client perspective if you can, kind of trace the path that it's taking through the network to see if it can reach those things. From the cluster perspective, I would be curious to know, you say the server only had 2 terabyte, but the cluster was 25 terabytes. Kubernetes is pretty good at, I'll say, scaling up or prioritizing those types of things. So it's possible that just enough of the application was up to be running, but not well and not serving all of the clients. So our Hope 9, I'm enjoying chatting with everyone. Like it's a lot of fun. It makes the time go by fast. And I have enjoyed, being able to, the last couple of weeks, we walked through things like live and we're learning together, and that's been a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yeah.
Amir Mahdi, please, if you could reach out to Johnny and I, you can reach out on email, and with your question and maybe some, any additional details that you're able to share would be helpful. And we'll catch up on that. We'll see what we can figure out around that. Again, andrew.sullivan@redhat.com. I didn't realize that when I clicked on showing the question, it took our stuff down. So andrew.sullivan@redhat.com or Johnny, Jonny @redhat.com. And yeah, Files, you can always join us. That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
All right. So Johnny, I will see you next week. And enjoy spring, all of the pollen that is happening here in the Raleigh area. My deck is yellow. My cars are yellow. I made the mistake of mowing the grass yesterday and was covered head to toe in yellow. And I was really expecting it to affect me today, and I'm surprised it hasn't. But anyways, yeah, I'll leave you with last words, Johnny. Thank you for everybody joining us.
Yeah, ditto, man. Today was awesome. I loved every minute of all the questions. I think it's outstanding. So I think it's great that we got to burn an hour, just answering stuff. So yeah, hopefully next week is the same thing. So thanks again, and yeah, see you next week.